No. Wicked.
All right, welcome everyone. I have about 3 or 4 minutes after. So my name is Jeff Fox. I'm the Central Indiana ASSP Chapter President, and we welcome you to the September chapter meeting, where our main topic with Karen and Paul today from the Indiana Compensation Rating Bureau is the challenges of managing safety with today's workplace or workforce demographics. So before we get into the presentation, I just have a couple quick announcements to talk about with the chapter and what's going on with the Central Indiana chapter. So obviously today is September 11th. So we remember back, what is it, almost 19 years ago to this event. So let's just have a quick moment of silence in the memory of those who have fallen in that event. Great, thank you. Okay, so obviously, you know, we like to meet face to face. That's a big advantage of our ASSP group, is networking with 500 plus safety professionals. But in the world of COVID, you know, our meetings have been transitioning to online formats. So, but we still do encourage participation if you can. Here's our next 3 meetings. Our October 28th meeting is a little bit different time and date that we usually do, because this is a partner meeting with CCS. So CCS is the Coalition for Construction Safety, a local organization similar to ASSP that focuses on safety and preventing injuries, but in the construction world. So that meeting is going to be called Best Practices for Involving Employees in Safety. So please, if you have that time available, that will be a live go-to meeting on October 28th. Then on November 13th, we did have a plan to do a tour of Roche Diagnostics, but we'll move that to next year. But we do have a great update around the changes to the NFPA 70E, and that'll be a Zoom webinar. And then usually our most heavily attended meeting is when we bring in Indiana Department of Labor and Indiana IOSHA, and we talk about what's happening with OSHA and Indiana OSHA. So we will probably be moving that to an online function as well. So please stay tuned for more information about that. But anytime you can go to our website to see the updated information on our meetings. We also partner with the Indiana Chamber of Commerce each and every year. The March 1st through the 3rd is the 2021 Safety Conference. Ideally, we would like to still hold this in person, but we are planning a hybrid conference if we do have to do this online in a virtual atmosphere. So I know a lot of people look forward to this, and they like to attend to get training sessions and get continuing education points for your certifications. So please, we urge you to go ahead and register. The event will still happen, whether it's in person or if it's online in a virtual atmosphere. One new addition that is very exciting, that is, if you are in attendance today in a meeting and you're interested in pursuing a BCSP certification, we have a person on our board. His name is David West, and he works for BCSP, and they're able to provide promo codes for discounted application fees. So typically an application fee for a certification is anywhere between $100 and $200. And so if you contact David West or reach out through me, more than likely they'll be able to provide you a promo code to take that cost off of your application fee. So great perk of being at today's meeting. We are always looking for sponsors for our meetings. So if your company has sponsorship opportunities or has some extra funds they would like to sponsor a chapter meeting, please reach out to us. We'd like to put advertisements in our monthly newsletter that goes out to 500 plus safety professionals, and then we'll give you 1 or 2 minutes at the beginning of the meeting to kind of talk about your company. So if you're interested in sponsoring and partnering with our chapter, please reach out to us. Hopefully everyone is employed, but if you're looking to transition to a different job, or you're looking for a job, we're always keeping the most updated health and safety positions available on our website. So if you just go to the Central Indiana ASSP website and you click on the jobs tab, it'll take you directly here to the most current jobs in the Central Indiana area. A new addition to our chapter this year is Purdue Students section. So we're happy to bring in the Purdue students as being a part of the Central Indiana chapter. So now we have Purdue, Indiana University, and Indiana State University underneath our chapter within Central Indiana. So very happy to have them as part of our group and eventually come into the safety world as future safety professionals. One thing our chapter loves to do is reach out into the community, whether that's a form of donations or if it's volunteer opportunities. We like to tie our donations and our volunteer activities to some type of safety related item. So a picture here, we donated 500 safety vests to a company. We went to Gleaners and we helped feed the local individuals. We wrote checks to provide fire extinguishers and first aids and AEDs and things of that nature. But sometimes it's difficult to come up with ideas on how to give away some of our money that we want to give to the local communities or organizations. So if you have an idea, please reach out to us and we'll be more than happy to talk with you on how we can reach out to the community to donate items or to do a volunteer activity. And lastly, I know we're not meeting face-to-face, but we urge you to stay connected, stay up to date with what's going on, continue to come to the monthly chapter meetings, continue to go to the website, and then also we have many social media avenues that you can follow us on. We have LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. The main way to get there is to type in CI ASSP, and that should take you directly to our social media accounts. So with that, I'm going to transition to Kevin Beswick, our program chair, and have them introduce our speakers. Kevin?
There we go. I should unmute myself first, I think. Might work better. So yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm really going to let our two speakers do most of the introductions here, but just wanted to start by thanking everybody for joining us. It looks like we have about 25 people currently, and that's fantastic. Excited about today, listening to Karen and Paul do this presentation. One of our board members attended this presentation and saw it and came back and said it was really good and thought it would be great for you know, our members to be able to hear. So just want to plant that seed with you all as well. If you know, as members, if you you know, hear of someone or you yourself feel like you have a good presentation that you'd could offer some you know, knowledge or benefit by sharing, please let us know. We'd love to you know, consider that. So today our presenters are Karen Byrd and Paul Keathley. They are with the Indiana Compensation Rating Bureau, and Karen is the president and CEO. She has over 25 years of experience in the workers' comp industry, and Paul is one of her employees as well. And I'll just turn it over to you guys and let you kind of introduce yourselves. As we talked about before everybody got on, you know yourselves better than I do, so I'll let you guys kind of take it from here.
All right, thanks,
Okay.
Kevin.
Are we ready to share?
Are we ready to share?
You want to?
Yep. Here. Click up. Get right there.
There we go. We're gonna start our presentation
It
here.
takes
So
two brains on this
yes,
side.
it does.
Here, right here.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so thank you so much, Kevin. It's so funny. You said you needed to take yourself off mute. I said I read something recently on Facebook that the quote of the year is "You're on mute." And I thought that was so hysterical because every single meeting I'm on these days, at least one person has to be told you're on mute. So we are really excited to be here today. My name is Karen Byrd. I am a fairly new transplant to Indiana. I am originally from North Carolina. I started my industry or my work career as a claims adjuster. I started out with Kemper. I was part of the Kemper Cavalry. I don't know if anybody remembers that from back in the day. But I've worked for 4 insurance carriers. I've worked with a lot of loss control and safety professionals. I've helped set up a lot of safety programs with a lot of manufacturers and construction companies. So I'm very well aware of a lot of what your membership does. I did transition out of claims about 16 years ago, and I have worked for 3 rating bureaus. There are only 10 in the country, so I'm getting quite a reputation. I think Indiana is going to be my last stop. I'm very happy here. I joined the Indiana Bureau. We call it the ICRB because it's a big mouthful when you say it all out. Last April when Ron Cooper retired. He had been here for almost 40 years. So those were some pretty big shoes to fill. And then shortly after he retired, a year later, the Vice President, Dwayne Schroeder, retired, which is when I hired Paul. So Paul is our Vice President now. He's been here since March. And actually served on our governing board for a few years. So he has some familiarization with what we did. And he comes to us from Accident Fund.
Yes.
So if you want to say a few things
Sure.
about yourself.
Yeah, so my background is a little different than Karen's. She comes from more of a claims background. I come from more of an underwriting background, commercial underwriting, and then specializing in workers' compensation over the last 6 to 10 years. Lastly, with Accident Fund, who is one of the largest workers' compensation writers in Indiana. They're out of Michigan. So we bring a little different perspectives of things, and you'll see that in our presentation, I think. And Karen really likes working here because she gets to work with me.
That's exactly it.
Right. So anyway, no, it's a pleasure to be here. My background, 34 years in the industry, most of that on the voluntary market side. So if you're familiar with what that means, I was not working with the assigned risk business, which we do now here at the pool, at the Bureau. That's what we manage, and we'll get into that a little later. But I come from a voluntary market background and have worked with a lot of safety professionals over the years. I would consult with the safety professionals that we had on a regular basis as I underwrote accounts and decided on pricing and that sort of thing. So great respect for what you guys do. I've seen many accounts that were having terrible experience, bad experience consistently. When they would work with the safety people and the loss control consultants, I saw their experience improve and their experience rating modification come down. So, and obviously the more importantly than that, you're making a safer place for the employees. So.
So we have a lot of information in our slide deck today. We're not going to go through everything word by word because I cannot stand people that read their slide decks. So, and we're kind of gloss through some of it because a lot of it you probably already know. It's just kind of, some of it might be a little basic, but we do want to focus just on a few things. And then we have a lot of demographic information toward the end. Talking specifically about Indiana data, but we do want to kind of talk about who we are because a lot of people really don't understand what a rating bureau is. It took me an entire year working for one before I really understood the nuances of everything we did. Because there are a lot of functions that we perform. And so I think it's really important to kind of explain what our role is in the state. We are not a state agency, but we are created by statute. We work very closely with the Department of Insurance and the Workers' Comp Board, but we also work closely with all of the workers' compensation insurance carriers. Our budget comes directly from those insurance carriers based on their proportionate writings, their book. We are empowered to gather all of the policy and claims data, and our main goal is to establish fair and adequate advisory rates. We also use that data collection to promulgate rules. We create experience ratings for each individual employer, and we're going to go into that a little more later.
Yes.
We also do inspections of businesses and classify those businesses. And Paul had mentioned that we do assigned risk administration. I'm not sure if you guys have a really good understanding of what that is, because assigned risk is my love. And I know that sounds really nerdy, but I'm a workers' comp nerd. It's all I've ever done. But if an employer cannot get business or cannot get a workers' comp policy in the standard market, they might be a high risk, or they might be a brand new employer that doesn't have any history, or they might just have a really high experience rating. A lot of insurance carriers just don't want to write that business. They might be too risky for them, for their book of business. So we do have a mechanism here at the Rating Bureau where an agent can submit an application to us. We do have 4 servicing carriers that we award a contract to on a 3-year basis, that we will assign that policyholder to, and they are required to write that policy for the year. So that's kind of the assigned risk administration part. But we also, all of the carriers in the state of Indiana have to pay into the assigned risk pool to help pay for all of those claims. So we manage the pool, and it's a pretty large sum of money. So that's part of my primary duty, is to oversee that pool. But we're also, tasked to educate the industry, which is kind of what we're doing with you guys today. And we also, one of our main functions is dispute resolution. So if anybody, an employer or a carrier, has any concerns about how their policy has been administered or classified, or how they've been billed, if they cannot resolve that on their own, that comes to us. And we have a dispute panel that we will formally hear that and issue a ruling. So there are a lot of functions that we do, and a lot of them are very different. A lot of them can be very exciting. A lot of them are very legal. We have to get involved with a lot of lobbyists and state legislators, but at the very core of it, we try to stay as neutral as we can and as fair as we can. Even though our budget is paid by the companies, our role as created by statute is to remain neutral and fair to all parties. So that's what we do. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
And so it's been really important for me, as I've come into to this bureau, to kind of to work with our staff and to really work on what is our core mission for our stakeholders in Indiana. And so our staff came up with this, and I thought it was really important for us to share with you what I thought was really important that we do. And so our company mission is that we provide resources to assist Indiana stakeholders navigate the complexity of workers' compensation. And to me, that is at the core of what we do. Workers' compensation is not easy. When I first started workers' compensation more than 25 years ago, it was called the redheaded stepchild. Nobody wanted to do workers' comp. I got stuck into it, and I thought I would get out of it as soon as possible, but I've loved it. And now it is a very important business, and a lot of people love to write workers' comp. In Indiana, it is a very profitable business, even though the rates are low. Business here is very steady. So we are here to provide resources for you, for the insurance carriers, for employers, for agents. The Department of Insurance contacts us, the legislature contacts us. So at any time, if you guys have any questions and need to ask us for a resource, we're here for that. Did you need to say
Absolutely.
something?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Next screen. We're going to get into workers' compensation insurance now.
Yep.
Okay. So looking at this picture, I don't know how they chose who got what job on this,
Mhm.
but hopefully they'll get some safety going at some point. But
These slides would probably be funnier if we were in person. We
Yeah.
could hear everybody laughing, but
you hope these are fake, but I don't think they are.
I don't think they're fake. All right. So this is just one of the basic slides that I'm not really going to go over a lot, because I think everybody as a safety professional knows what workers' compensation is. But, just having it created to make sure that injured workers get compensation without having to sue their employers, and that it's created to help employers not have to defend lawsuits, is an important part of workers' comp. But the most important part, I think, to point out here is that workers' comp is a no-fault system. And so when we just saw a picture like we saw on the previous slide, I always said stupidity is not a reason for denial of a claim. Even though you have safety programs in place, safety committees, you have safety equipment, guards on machines, there is always going to be something that happens. Somebody's going to take a guard off, somebody's going to just not be thinking. There are always going to be those accidents. And so workers' compensation itself is super important. And a good safeguard. So we've got some pictures throughout here, and I think it's funny, but the one on the right, I think is hysterical, because they're talking about work safely, and he's lifted up on a forklift. I just think that's
A little irony there.
kind of crazy.
Right.
Most of you know what's covered under workers' comp: wage replacement, compensation for future income loss, reimbursement for medical costs, death benefits. One thing that's not usually covered under basic workers' comp benefits is safety. And usually most of that has to be paid for in addition to the regular workers' comp policy. And I think it's so important. We see a lot of larger employers that have loss control and safety programs, or safety folks hired on staff. But where we really see a lot of problems is with the smaller employers that don't have the money or the resources to do that. And they get in trouble with a very high experience rating because they don't have safety programs, or they're hiring people that they're not training or doing full, they're not watching over thoroughly. So those are really big issues that we see in the industry. We do see larger losses with the larger companies, but they don't seem to be as severe because of folks like you that are involved in the larger manufacturers, or in the medical communities, or in the big trucking firms. So it's just something to point out of what we see.
Yeah, and some of the statistics we point out later, you'll see the impact that you all in safety roles have on the severity losses. So,
okay.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
I told Paul he had to do this in
Yeah.
the sexiest man alive voice.
I think it's the most interesting man in the world.
Most
actually.
interesting
Yeah,
man. Sorry.
I'm not actually going to try and do his voice, but
Come on.
I think you can all hear him saying this.
Okay.
Yeah, and I love the guy drilling with his knee under the whatever he's drilling there.
Yeah. All right, things that are not covered under workers' comp, we all know: pain and suffering, punitive damages, and employers' negligent behavior. But one of the things I wanted to point out in this slide, and I need to put my glasses on to read it, is kind of in the last paragraph. It says, workers' comp advocates argue that it makes the workplace safer, protects employees, keeps employees from having the burden of proving negligence to get compensation, and consequently keeps costs low for everyone. And I think that that's a really important part to keep in mind as we're going through this today, because keeping costs low for everyone and keeping employees safe is the crux of what you do, and why we're here today to talk about that. So let's move that forward.
Okay.
And these will be our last slides.
These are our last
pictures.
But this really isn't, they're kind of funny when you see them doing this, but coming from an underwriting background, as I mentioned, with large company, actually some of the worst claims I saw were from guys doing exactly this, using ladders in stairwells. Not necessarily doing what these guys are doing, but just not a good place to use a ladder.
Right. One of the last claims I denied was a ladder claim,
Yeah.
and it was a death claim.
Yeah.
But okay, so in this slide, we're talking about the safety impact of an employer, and in the first bullet point, it talks about OSHA estimates that employers pay almost $1 billion per week for direct workers' compensation costs alone. So let me say that again, because I think it's extremely impactful. It's estimated that employers pay almost $1 billion per week for direct workers' compensation cost. That is a staggering amount in just one country alone. In the bottom bullet point, it also talks about OSHA says that employers who establish employee safety programs are able to reduce their cost related to injury and workplace illness by up to 40%. And I just think that both of those statistics or those informational points are really telling. And I mean, to reduce your cost by 40% to have a safety program in place is a pretty amazing thing.
Which is right directly related to what you all do.
Right. So all right.
Okay.
You're up.
So what we're going to do, we're going to look a little bit at the financial impacts of a workers' compensation claim. I'm not going to go too, like Karen said, we're not going to read the screens here. But the important thing that we're going to look at here is the experience modifier. And I'm sure you're all somewhat familiar with that in your backgrounds. And this is the experience modification is the area that employers have the most control over their insurance costs by controlling it through safety programs, through automation, through personal protective equipment, all the things that you help them with. So let's just take a quick, we'll go through it. I'm not going to get too far into the details on experience rating, but hopefully you'll pick up a few things you may not have known as we go through this. The basic principles for the experience modification factor in Indiana is we're going to look at an employer's past experience to predict their future losses, which coming from an underwriting background, that's what we did as an underwriter. We would try to look at their past experience and say, okay, we can expect this amount of loss in the next 3 years if we write this account at this price, and will it be profitable? Then what the experience modification does, or the experience rating plan, it compares the losses to an average risk in your classification of business. So if you're a manufacturer, and it will look at your governing class codes and your size, so the amount of payroll, and the actuaries will give you an expected loss amount, which represents the average losses. So for an average insured in that class. And then if you do things better than average, we'll go to the next slide, and your losses compared to the average employer in your class are lower, then you will have a credit experience mod and your insurance costs come down. If they're higher than average, you get a debit experience mod and your costs can go significantly up. I've seen mods on a regular basis of 1.50 to 2.0. So they're right out of the gates paying double what someone else would be paying that they compete with. If anybody has any questions as we go, feel free to let us know. So why have experience rating? I mean, what the experience rating plan does in a nutshell is all of the things that you help employers with, developing safety programs, developing automation that protects, protective equipment, safety guards on machinery, making sure that things are done properly and that there's a good safety culture in a company. It gives us a way to kind of measure that and reflect these factors so that even though you have a roofing company here and another roofing company over here, they do things completely different, and their experience mod will show that. The benefits, obviously, it helps employers have control over their costs. If they're willing to, hopefully most employers care about their employees, but they also have a financial incentive to develop safety programs, to make sure that they are doing the right things from a safety standpoint to reduce their claims. So it gives them influence directly on how much they're paying and on their costs. We're going to go into it a little bit later on another screen, but the experience rating plan has some things built into it that provide incentives for early return to work programs, very strong financial incentives, which I know you all help develop. And just overall, the experience rating plan helps promote occupational safety. And this last bullet's important. It makes one of the things we're very involved in, as I said, as Karen pointed out, is making sure that rate adequacy is maintained in the state. Well, the employers that are doing the right things, that have low losses, that protect their employees, should pay a lower premium, and that's the right premium for them. Employers that don't have a good operation, that don't invest in safety, that don't have a good safety culture in general, and management's not involved in it, they're going to pay more, and that's the right premium for that risk.
I do want to say one thing here. In the day of COVID, a lot of the information that we've got on some of our slides, we're always talking about past data. So a lot of our information here is not COVID loaded because it's too early to have any of that in our data. But as far as experience rating is concerned, the ICRB did make a filing with the Department of Insurance that has been approved because we did not feel that employers should be penalized for any claims filed against them for COVID. Because right now, that is just something no one can control. So there was a national filing. We agreed that we would make that same filing in Indiana. The Department of Insurance immediately approved that. So right now, we're talking about experience rating. But if an employee files a claim against an employer in Indiana for COVID, none of that, and it's an accepted claim, none of that experience is going to count against an employer. So I just wanted to make sure that we told you that. I know that you guys are not in underwriting or anything, but I just thought that that was an important for everybody to know. And also furloughed employees that were laid off or furloughed just because of the COVID situation. I know a lot of plants shut down for a while, but during the furlough period, their payroll will not be considered audited payroll during that time.
Right.
So, you know, like I said, we try to be fair, do things right, but we wanted to be fair to the employers. We didn't feel like they needed to get stuck with something that they could not control.
Right.
So I thought that was an important note for you guys to know.
It's so
Karen,
hard.
do you see that? Karen, do you see that changing in the future, in a year or two, or do you think it'll remain that way?
It depends. The original filing was for that to be effective through December 31st of this year. And there is talk, since COVID is not quelled at all, that there will probably be an extension. I don't know if it'll be like an indefinite filing and then we'll, file later to end it. I'm not sure how they're going to refile that, but I'm sure there will be an end date.
Yeah.
Sure.
But right now, there's so many unknowns. There will probably be multiple filings.
We just don't really know the impact right now of COVID because, a lot of claims will be denied in COVID because it does fall under an exclusion. Normal illnesses are not covered under workers' compensation, as you're probably all aware.
Well, and one of the things, I don't know if you're aware, but the Workers' Comp Board, this is a very odd situation. Usually the insurance company makes the compensability determination unless you're self-insured, and then the employer does that. But the Workers' Comp Board issued a decree at the beginning of COVID saying that they were going to let the employer make the compensability decision. And that is very unusual. And so if you get into an issue where you have an employee and the employer that are in an adversarial relationship, well, I'm just going to deny your claim because I don't like you. So I think that we could see some litigation. I don't know. I know that the last time I talked to the Workers' Comp Board, and it's been almost 2 months, so I don't have current statistics, but there were less than 3,000 COVID claims, workers' comp claims filed. Over 600 of them had been denied, and there had only been about 10 death claims associated with COVID. So I expected that to be a little higher. So I was really happy it wasn't. I will have some more updated statistics in the next week or two, but so anyway, I just thought that was interesting to know.
It just falls into such somewhat of a gray area right now, because if you're a direct responder or you're in a medical profession, you probably have a more direct causal effect from COVID that you could say, hey, at work I was exposed to COVID. But in a normal employment situation, you're going to have to look at everything that employee does. Maybe they got it at the gym, maybe they got it at the store. We all do so many things that would be hard to say in most of our cases that, hey, I got it at work. So that's the challenge. But okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take over with COVID.
No, you're good. You're
No,
good.
that's actually, guys, that's great. I'm glad you inserted that, Karen. And I have an additional question to add on to that. And that's some of our members, even though most of us are based out of Indiana, our members are, we do have some other chapter members invited to attend as well. And even our Indiana members, some of us manage work outside the state.
Right.
So this exemption, so you will, does it apply to other states as well, or is that Indiana specific?
It does. I don't know that every state has filed it, but I do know that most every state has filed a version of it. So the National Council on Compensation Insurance is based out of Florida, and most states subscribe to their national rules. And to my knowledge, there are 38 states that usually subscribe to their rules. So for the most part, I would assume that those states have approved that or approved a version of it. States like California, New York, New Jersey, their governors are very involved politically in the workers' comp system. So their rules were drastically different. But everybody else, I think we're very similar. And, there are some monopolistic states too, like Washington, Ohio. So theirs might be a little different as well. But for the most part, I think everybody has made a similar filing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It varies by state. I mean, I was in a meeting about COVID, and California had basically taken a position that if you had been at work within the last 2 weeks, it would be a compensable claim.
Yeah, they're
a lot more
it's
liberal.
California, they're accepting everything.
Yes, that's surprising.
They were less employer friendly on it probably, and more towards the employee. But
yeah. And
Okay.
I say that coming from there.
Yeah. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So getting back to experience rating.
We're at 11:41.
Oh shoot, we better get moving. So the characteristics in Indiana, I'll move through these pretty quickly, but these are just how the experience rating plan works in Indiana. So you have to be still a small account, but you have to have an average premium of $2,750 over a 3-year period, or $5,500 in 1 year. So obviously that's still not a large account, but at that point you become eligible to have an experience modification. Once you have one, it has to be applied. So companies do not have the option to, in a voluntary market like where I came from, say, hey, I'm going to waive the experience factor, and that way I can get a lower premium and be more competitive. They're not allowed to do that. So, and I think we all understand the principle that the larger the risk is, you're going to have greater credibility in the claims experience, because a large manufacturer will have a consistent amount of claims year to year. And if they're doing the right things, they will consistently be lower than the average. Now, there may still be that fluke claim, and we'll get into some of that in a minute, that is a large pop on their experience. But for the most part, you'll be able to really see their claims experience. Whereas a small $2,750 account may go 10 years without a claim because they have 3 employees. And then they finally have one after 10 years.
They have a whopper.
And they have, what's a whopper to them? And it hits their experience modification. So, and the experience rating plan does give greater weight to frequency. The principle behind that is that frequency, if you're having a lot of claims, that's more of an indication of your overall safety environment and how you're doing things. Anybody can have the strange claim that happens. When I was an underwriter, I had one where a guy got hit by lightning in their parking lot, and there wasn't even a storm going on. And it was a terrible claim. It was over $1 million. And something like that, not a reflection on the employer from an experience rating standpoint, really. So. And we mentioned that it looks at past experience. This is just a general breakdown of how that works. So if you have a January 1 effective experience mod in 2020. We're going to go back to the 2016 year, 17 year, and 18 year. The current year or the last year in your experience is never used in the experience rating plan because, as we all know, claims fluctuate quite a bit, especially that first year in terms of reserves. They can go up and down dramatically. It's just not, it's not fair to the employer to consider that in their experience rating. Okay, here's some of the limitations that are built in on the experience rating plan. And this is where you guys come into some of this, because you've got a large claim, as we mentioned, it gets capped. So that claim I mentioned that was over $1 million gets capped at $196,000. These are the protections that are built in against severity losses. So after that, we have what we call the split point in Indiana, and that's $17,500. So everything up to that amount is considered the primary loss. Everything after $17,500 goes into what we call the excess losses in the experience formula. What happens to those excess losses is they're at a much reduced percentage in the calculation of the experience mod. So really only that $17,500 is really hitting their mod directly. So for a large employer, that's a big protection. Obviously a $17,500 claim can still hit a small employer pretty hard, but then the important one on the early return to work programs, and this is something that, you know, safety professionals, agents, underwriters, everyone needs to be pointing out to employers. If you invest in an early return to work program, you keep people from having lost time claims. Medical only claims are only used, 30% of the claim amount is used in the experience modification calculation. So you get a 70% reduction if they don't have any lost time. So you have that employee that might be out 2 weeks. If they have permission from a doctor with certain limitations to come back to work, and you can give them anything to do rather than having them sit at home, it will save quite a bit on the experience rating. Any questions on that? Okay. And then just, I want to end this section with just a little general breakdown of Indiana, because that's what we manage. You can see why employers want to do business in Indiana. It is a good state from a safety standpoint overall. The average experience modification is 0.96. 80% of them, as you can see to the right, fall in that 0.70 to 0.99 range. And you can see the numbers break down over on the left at the bottom in terms of the actual numbers. Personally, I've never seen a 3.15. I didn't even know they went that high until we ran this data. So
they're probably in the assigned risk
I'm
pool.
assuming they're one of our customers in the assigned risk pool at this point. Yes. Okay. So
All right, well, let's talk about some of the demographics and just some, we've got a lot of just information that might be useless or might be helpful, but but just some, I thought it might be interesting for you to see who the top 10 insurers are. Just looking at the top 3, they have the majority writings in our entire state. That's Travelers, Accident Fund, and Liberty Mutual. And it's interesting to point out that those 3 carriers are also 3 of our 4 servicing carriers in our assigned risk plan. So part of this premium writings that you're seeing in their top 10 is also, it's voluntary market writings plus their residual market writings. And so we have very good established relationships with them. We have members, all 3 of these carriers have members on our governing board. So anyway, I just thought that was interesting. And then I thought it might be interesting to see the top 10 class code breakdowns for both the voluntary market and the residual market. So there's very little commonality between the two. The only things that are common is trucking and store wholesale. Everything else is different. I expected to see the clerical and the drivers, chauffeurs, messengers, because those 2 are built into a lot of the different other class codes. Indiana is a very heavy manufacturing state, as you all are aware of. And we see a lot of manufacturers in this list: plastic manufacturing, metal stamped goods. I think there was another machine shop could be considered that, automobile manufacturing. So these are the class codes that I would pretty much expect to see in Indiana. And this makes up for 1.2 billion dollars of premium,
Right.
with 101,000 policies. So that's a pretty good chunk of what's going on in Indiana.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, since I do come from an underwriting background, these are the classes that you see the voluntary markets interested in. And what you're going to see on the next screen, as Karen's going to go through it, is what we manage in the assigned risk pool.
That nobody wants.
That a lot of them are classes of business that just because of what they do, it doesn't matter how safely they do it, it's just because of what they do. Voluntary insurers do not want to cover them. So let's go to that.
So these are the top 10 class codes for the assigned risk market. And again, we see trucking here too. So I think the difference, I think while we have trucking in both voluntary and assigned risk, really it depends on their experience rating. I think that is a big driver. So, but here is where we see all of the construction, carpentry, roofing,
and that's
tree pruning.
That carpentry is framing for the most part, which is very high risk.
Right. So. And we see some medical. We got social service organizations, and home, public, travel, healthcare. Paul and I were talking about this earlier. I fully expect this list to be different a year from now. I am suspecting that when the January 1 renewals come for next year, that we will probably see some more medical facilities, nursing homes, independent living facilities. I imagine that they'll be coming through the residual market. It's just going to depend on how many COVID claims get filed for these businesses and how hard the market gets. I understand, based on your conversations with your contacts, that the market's still a little soft right now.
Yeah, it is.
But it's going to be very dependent on the claims and what happens in the next, within the next year. But I think we might see some more medical in the assigned risk market.
Yeah, I agree with that. The market is still very soft, and when we say that, I think most of you understand that. But it's right now still a buyer's market. So insurers are looking to write business in Indiana, and the pricing is still low and competitive. But I do know, I won't mention any names obviously, but I know of a company that just had an assisted living facility with a multi-million-dollar COVID claim that is compensable at this point. So I think when you start seeing those kinds of claims, Karen's right, we'll see more of those type risks come to the assigned risk market. So.
Right. All right, looking at Indiana's labor market, and again, this data is all pre-COVID. I just want to make sure we know that, because I know with unemployment has gone up since then, so a lot of this might no longer be true. But manufacturing sector has had the largest payroll in Indiana, and our employment growth in 2019 grew faster than the national rate in several sectors, to include construction, trade, transportation, and utilities. So I thought that was really important to kind of point out, because I think that those are large enough sections that those are probably the kind of businesses that do have a lot of eyes on them as far as safety programs. You don't see a lot of mom and pop companies. I mean, you might see like a self-employed construction person, or a handyman, but any of the large general contractors, they're going to have safety programs in place. So yeah, but education and health services definitely will have some employee health and safety. Education, probably not too much. I don't know that it's in the budget, but I just thought those were interesting.
And then that last bullet point, just something to take away from that, we're really growing in these areas in Indiana. These are the areas that are really going to benefit from the safety programs that you all help with. So. Okay. Just a little snapshot of, and again, some of this actually was after COVID, but things that were taking place in June of this year. This is taken from Moody's Analytics. So vehicle sales recovered quickly, and we had bigger job gains in some of the high-paying service industries. But and I think a lot of you are in manufacturing. COVID-19 outbreak has done more damage to the manufacturing logistics. Manufacturers have struggled to stay, producing at a rate that they need to, and that sort of thing, and getting the product out. So, and then the developments in the trade war has depressed steel prices further, and that's also costing some jobs.
And one thing, it was interesting, we were talking with a group of in the construction industry, and my understanding is that the construction industry did not take a hit during COVID whatsoever.
Yeah.
But what has taken a hit is there were not as many contracts signed for projects going forward. So what we might see from a workers' comp perspective is that there might not be as many people employed in these construction type roles next year, because there were a lot of people that were concerned about what's the state of the economy going to be, where's COVID going, and that might have changed in the last month or two since I had that conversation. I'm sure that road construction will continue because there's always a big push in Indiana to do road construction as soon as the winter is over, because the roads have terrible potholes, I've learned since I've been in Indiana. As far as building, I'm just not sure how that is going to go. But anyway, that was just one thing I learned from the Manufacturers Association.
Okay.
I don't think it was manufacturers, it was somebody else.
Then, this slide, the takeaway, we don't want to spend too long on some of these, but they're here for you to look at some data that might be interesting to you. I think the plus here is Indiana's down slightly in terms of the change in private employment compared to the average in the country, but we're still positive in all areas.
Right. And some of this is just a lot of data points for you guys to just take away. I mean,
Right.
I think that whereas unemployment right now is down because of COVID, prior to that, I mean, Indiana is a very great state to work in. It's a great state to have a business in. A lot of businesses are moving from Illinois, moving their companies here because it's cheaper to do business here. Go to the next one.
Sure.
The average weekly wages here are not bad. The national average in 2019 was plus 3.5. Indiana's was plus 2.5. But we're a Midwestern state. We're not California. We're not Texas. We're not New York. So if you're aggregating the whole country, 2.5, a plus 2.5 is not bad. And this slide always confuses me, but basically what I get from this slide as far as the payroll growth is that we're 1% behind the national average in payroll growth, which is kind of what we just saw before.
Yep.
Now, this slide I think is very important and might be helpful to everybody. It just kind of shows the employment sector, the change employment sector. But if you look at this, Indiana has grown in everything except in like IT and manufacturing. And
only down slightly in manufacturing.
Right. And our manufacturing business is really still strong because that's what we were really strong at anyway. But from a national perspective, we grew more in construction, trade, transportation, utilities, other services, I don't know what those are, and natural resources and mining than the national average. And that was in the year 2019. So I thought those were interesting statistics. And then this is kind of a different slide for the same industries, just showing the payroll growth in those industries. Whereas construction had the largest increase. And it was interesting, Paul and I kept wondering, this natural resources and mining, where's that? We need to do some digging on that. I don't know where all that growth is coming from. Do you guys have any idea on that?
Yeah, any insights on that?
Because that's the first time we've seen this in this graph. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll dig into that.
We'll do some digging.
Yeah.
This is just showing you the changes in claim frequencies since 2004 through 2018. So claim frequency has gone down by almost 40% in that time frame. If you go to the
Which
next,
is a direct corollary to what you guys help,
which is a
what you're
corollary
doing.
to safety
Correlation.
and
Yeah.
health practices. And this is another view of that. But it's interesting on the flip side, go to the next slide. Lost time claim severity has increased since 2004 by almost by over 35%. So I just thought those were interesting statistics to share. I don't know if you were going to do anything with those, but I thought you might like to see
Yeah,
those.
we decided.
So let's go to my favorite slide. We can look at these later. Go.
Which one you want?
That one right here. This
Okay.
is my favorite. All right, this is my favorite slide, these next two. So Indiana is a very unique state in that we pay more in medical expenses than any other state than one, and I can't off by the top of my head remember who it is. We do not have a medical fee schedule in place except for hospitals. And that went into place in 2014. So doctors have gotten very creative. And now what you see is that they are now sending patients to ambulatory surgery centers rather than hospitals because they can make more money there. Because Indiana has very defined indemnity benefits, there's a 500-week maximum cap on indemnity. You'll see here that Indiana pays 27% of all claims are in the indemnity bucket compared to the countrywide average of 42%. And we're paying a 73% of all claims toward medical, whereas the nationwide average is 58%. That is a huge difference. And the sole reason for that is because we don't have a fee schedule in place. And there's another reason is that Indiana, we on workers' compensation, our injured workers have surgery faster than most any other state's injured workers do, which is interesting, but they get back to work faster. So I kind of like that our medical professionals don't mess around and they don't seem to make everybody take all these useless tests and wait for years on end before they do something. But I just find this graph very interesting from an expense breakdown. So go to the next slide because I think it's interesting. And here there's a little disparity. So in Indiana, is that 84? I don't have my glasses on.
84%.
84% of our claims are medical only. Countrywide, 75% of the claims are medical only. So I think we're doing a really good job of minimizing the severity of losses or getting people back to work in a early fashion.
The return to work programs.
So that really, I'm sure a lot of that has to do with a lot of safety programs that have been put in place, a lot of safety practices, a lot of safety equipment. And then 10% of our claims are lost time, which is the countrywide average is 15. So that's a pretty significant difference as well. And then I think it's interesting too that we have a very high surgery rate, but we have a very low permanent partial rate, which is the, when you get paid for any permanency for that surgery. So ours is at 6% and the countrywide average is at 10%. So I find this type of demographic information very interesting because it tells you, I think it tells you a lot about what good we're doing. I think it tells you where we're failing, where we need to have a more robust fee schedule. There was an initiative last year in the state legislature. We were contacted multiple times to provide several senators and state representatives with data with some what if situations to expand the medical fee schedule. And on the very last day of the session, that bill got scrapped. So I know the medical lobby, they have a big lobby. So I don't think it's going to come back around this year in the legislature because my understanding is that the only thing they'll deal with this year is budget and anything COVID related. So we might not see anything come back about the fee schedule till probably 2022. So I just thought that might be interesting.
I want to skim through these.
All right, so the other thing, and you guys probably don't care about this at all, but I thought it might be interesting. We have done, one of the things we do are file rate filings every year. We are in the process of doing that right now, so I cannot tell you what we're going to be filing this year because we've not done that yet. But we have filed for rate decreases for the last 4 years. The last time we did a rate increase was in 2016. Again, all this is on past data that we get in from the carriers, from their policies. So last year we did a negative 6.7 advisory rate decrease. But on the next slide, I want you to see how that impacts different.
Yeah, do we want to share how low our rates are? Because one of the things that employers should be aware of in Indiana is there's only one state with lower rates. We are the 49th lowest rate state. Yeah, Arkansas.
Really?
Yep, Arkansas is the only state with lower rates than Indiana for employers. So it's a very employer-friendly state.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
So even though we did a 6.9%, was it 6.7? 6.9.
6.7.
Okay, 6.7% decrease. Certain industries were impacted differently, and that's because of their specific losses. They either managed them better or they managed them worse. So if you look at the contracting industry, they were impacted. They had an 8.8% decrease. So they did really good in their losses in the date range that we looked at. Manufacturing only had a 6.3% decrease. So their losses were a little higher. So this is why we look at everything by a classification code and by an industry. So when we do a rate filing, it impacts those industries differently. So I just kind of, I didn't know if you guys knew that, if it mattered, but this is really the crux of what we do with all that data we collect. And it's really, I mean, this is really important to our business. But one of the things I wanted to add to this slide too, and it's another COVID thing, is that, and it's the last thing we'll talk about, and then we'll open it up for questions. But safety protocols, as we know them, for every single business, for every single office, has changed throughout the entire world as a result of COVID. You can't go to the CVS, you can't go to the grocery store, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't even come into our office without everything being changed. We've moved our cubicles around to make sure we're socially distanced correctly. People wear masks. I'm not wearing one today.
Even though we don't socially distance when we do presentations.
Yeah, we've been working together a lot. I feel like we're okay. But, you know, there's hand sanitizer everywhere. It's going to be very interesting to me if we get together a year from now, 2 years from now, how COVID is going to permanently impact your industry. Because I remember early on with the whole COVID situation, hearing about all of these, you know, pork producing plants that had COVID run rampant with their employees that had to shut down or they wanted to shut down. And, you know, where are we going to be a year or two from now? I have no idea. You know, it's just, and we also don't know, I had mentioned before, what the financial impact is going to be. Every employer, even to go get my nails done, now there's this plexiglass between me and the nail tech. I mean, everything that they've had to construct is costing businesses financially to protect their employees and to protect their customers. So it'll be very interesting when all the statistical data comes out to show what the cost has been for the employers, for the businesses to protect their employees, to protect their customers, and then what that cost is going to be ongoing. So I would love for you guys to ask us any questions or answers, or for you guys to even give me your thought process on how you think that's going to be in the next year or two, because, you know, as we're looking at the future, you know, you're out in the field and you see things, and that would be very helpful for us too, because I haven't been out to a business in a while. But that's all we have. So we would love to hear your feedback if you've got any. What is that?
I have no idea.
You just made it fancy.
Wow.
Paul went fancy on me.
Any questions that we can answer from anybody?
So I've got one. Earlier in the presentation, I think it was you, Paul, that pointed out this bullet that greater weight when considering the calculation of the EMR is given to frequency over severity.
Right.
Just to clarify that for people, that does not include record-only claims, correct?
Those are anything under 2,000. They typically aren't even shown as individual claims on your experience modification, so they will be grouped. But what I meant by that statement was when you're talking about that split point of 17,500, where everything above that becomes, it goes into, it isn't weighted as heavily. So that's your main claim is going to be the primary 17,500. So if you have one claim that's $50,000, 17,500 of that goes against your experience modification directly. If you have 5 claims of $10,000, each one of them the full amount goes in. So you're going to get that 50,000 hit on your experience mod.
Right.
Yeah. But you're right. The very small claims don't weigh in heavily. They're grouped. They're just clumped together on your rating.
So a record-only claim, just to be...
A record only, you're talking about a zero.
Well, there's no
nothing, there's
financials
no
on
paid,
that, right?
nothing paid. That would not go against your
That wouldn't
experience
count at
mod.
all.
Right.
Right.
That's, you're talking just report only.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some carriers will allow you to do that and some won't in the voluntary market. So
Yeah, but the thing is, we really encourage everybody to report those claims because if they become something larger later, we don't want them to be denied because they were never reported.
right.
And so we don't hold those against the employer for reporting purposes.
Right. But if an employer is sending someone that has a very minor claim to get the proper medical care, whether it's first aid and get something taken care of it, and they report it, but there's no amount paid, that would not hit their experience rating.
Right. Or if they have an employee health nurse on staff and there's no cost to that,
right,
that the employer absorbs that's not going to count against their experience rating.
Correct.
One other thing that I just, it really kind of was interesting to me, but I kind of would want more information to better understand it is the, the frequency over the last, I think it was what, a 14-year period, 2004 to 2018. Frequency had gone down 40%, but yet lost time went up 35%.
Yeah.
Look into, I guess one question would be, as far as the increase for 35%, do we know how much, as far as head count or man hours worked have increased? I mean, did we increase 50% in man hours worked and head count? I mean, that would kind of give you an understanding maybe, or me an understanding of, the increase in lost time of 35%. Was that we're truly, having more lost time, or, I guess it would help me understand better as far as how negative of a mark that is.
Yeah, and that's something I don't think we have that data right at our fingertips today. But,
right. We can reach out to our actuary and see if we can get whatever that supporting data is. He just gives us the pretty charts.
Yeah.
But the important thing to take away too, as we pointed out, even though it has increased, Indiana is still lower on lost time claims than the average. So
good.
It's not that it is a significant problem in Indiana. It has just increased.
Well, and you have to remember too, since 2004 to 2018, the average weekly wage continues to go up year after year. And then, if the severity of the claim, it just, it depends on, there's a lot of factors. So, but I'll see if I can't get that for you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Okay. Good question though.
Yep. Any other questions that we can answer?
All right.
quiet group today.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thank you, Karen, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And anyone interested in the presentation, please email us, myself or Kevin, and we'll get the presentation over to you. And we'll also find a way if we can post it on our website. So hopefully everyone picked up a few new things. I've heard a lot about this topic, but I learned about 3 or 4 new things today. So much appreciated you guys joining today, and everyone, all of our members, thanks for joining as well. So have a great rest of your day and a great weekend, everyone.
You
Yeah.
too.
Everybody have a good day.
Thanks so much. Bye.